Hello dear viewer. Glowing Star, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and check out our previous and upcoming videos. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. Now let's step into a tale of mystery, unexpected warnings and life-changing events. Avellini Carter was walking through her neighborhood's small grocery store, the warm yellow lights cutting through the soft haze of a snowy evening. Her thick gloves were pulled tightly over her hands, a colorful scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, yet the winter chill still nipped at her. She had only planned to grab a few essentials, but something invisible in the air made her feel unusually alert. That's when she noticed an elderly woman struggling at the end of an aisle, trying to place a pack of bread and pastries on the checkout belt but falling short on funds. The line behind her grew impatient, and most shoppers muttered complaints or sighed. Without hesitation, Avellini stepped forward and smiled gently. "Here, let me cover that for you," she said. The woman's eyes, shining beneath her woolen hat, suddenly locked onto Avellini's. "When your husband leaves, don't touch the snow in your yard," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. Avellini blinked in disbelief. Something about that gaze made ignoring the warning impossible, sending a shiver down her spine while simultaneously sparking curiosity. As the elderly woman accepted her help, Avellini reflected on how her life had shifted over the years. She was 58 and her shopping habits had changed quietly. She no longer chased sales but frequented familiar stores where clerks knew her name. The comfort of routine had settled over her life, but this small act of kindness reminded her that compassion can ripple through ordinary days in ways she never expected. The woman's eyes seemed almost otherworldly as they met hers. "Be careful, my dear. That snow, tonight, it could change everything." Avellini smiled politely, though deep down she knew this was no ordinary warning. Stepping outside, the wind whipped at her face, sending snowflakes swirling around her. Thoughts of home and her husband, Edward, who had left early that morning for a business trip, filled her mind. Normally, he would have shoveled the driveway immediately, but now she hesitated. Should she follow his routine, or heed the strange warning of the elderly stranger? On the crowded bus ride home, Avellini's thoughts raced. Passengers huddled against the cold seemed like strangers, yet each carried a story. Life, she realized, often delivered unexpected lessons through small acts or cryptic warnings from strangers. Arriving home, dark windows reflected the harsh winter night. Edward's car had disappeared, and the warmth of the home had not yet returned. Unpacking groceries, her motions were habitual, but her mind was restless. Should she ignore the stranger's advice or take it seriously? Could this old woman somehow know something Avellini couldn't see? That night, as the wind howled and the house groaned under its weight, Avellini realized how a simple act of kindness could ripple through her life in ways she never imagined. Wrapped in a thick blanket by the kitchen window, she stared at the swirling snow outside, the old woman's warning echoing in her mind. She tried to dismiss it as superstition, but the intensity of that gaze lingered. The house was silent except for the wind, every creak making her jump. Sipping tea, her hands trembling, she wondered if she should call a friend or the local authorities. But who would believe her story? A strange warning about snow, footprints circling the yard, alone in the house. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Around 11:30 p.m., a noise outside made her heart pound. Leaning forward, she could see deep footprints leading from the gate to her house. They weren't Edward's. Someone had walked around her property without attempting entry, moving methodically, like a predator surveying its target. Avellini froze. Should she call for help or hide? Her pulse raced as she realized how vulnerable she was, alone in a house that felt colder than ever. Just as she reached for the phone, the doorbell rang. Hesitant, she peeked through the frosted glass. A tall figure in a dark coat stood outside. "Miss Carter?" the man asked, his voice low but calm. "I'm Detective Marcus Hale. I'm investigating unusual activity in the neighborhood tonight. May I come in?" Avellini's fingers trembled, but she nodded. Something about Marcus inspired trust. His calm, professional presence, his awareness of danger without dramatization. She led him inside, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. Marcus scanned the living room and assured her, "You're safe for now. But someone has been near your house tonight. I need details of anything unusual you noticed." Avellini recounted her encounter at the grocery store, the elderly woman, the cryptic warning, and the footprints outside. Marcus listened intently, jotting notes. You said the footprints circled the house without attempting entry? He asked. Yes, Avellini replied. It's like they were surveying. But why? And why now? Marcus nodded. We'll find out. Do you have security cameras or neighbors who might have seen something? She thought of Mrs. Eldridge, her next-door neighbor. A retired librarian, she had installed cameras years ago after a break-in. Yes, she might have recorded something. Despite the blizzard, Avellini and Marcus headed next door. Snow clung to their coats and boots, wind cutting at their faces, but fear drove them onward. Mrs. Eldridge greeted them with concern. Avellini, what's wrong? There's been someone outside my house tonight, Avellini explained. Footprints circling the yard. Your cameras might have caught it. Mrs. Eldridge led them to her living room, where a small monitor displayed her security footage. Visibility was poor in the storm, but shapes moving around Avellini's property were visible. At 11:45 p.m., a dark sedan appeared and a tall man stepped into the yard. He circled the house with careful precision, closing the gate behind him before disappearing into the snowy night. Marcus paused the video, squinting. Notice how methodical he is. This isn't a random burglar. Someone planned this. Avellini felt a chill run down her spine. Could this be what the old woman had warned about? Mrs. Eldridge shook her head. Why would anyone come here and not take anything? Marcus's gaze was sharp. It's not about taking. It's about knowing. Someone wants information about this house and its owner. Avellini's mind raced. Her simple act of kindness at the grocery store had set off a chain of events she never imagined. Tonight was no longer about snow or superstition. It was about safety, trust, and uncovering a mystery that had quietly been waiting to surface. Absolutely. Let's continue seamlessly with Chapter 3 in the same continuous, suspenseful, and engaging style, keeping Avellini's story gripping and the audience hooked. I'll make sure the stakes rise, new characters appear, and tension builds for the next stage of the mystery. Avellini sat on the edge of Mrs. Eldridge's couch, her eyes glued to the monitor as the last grainy frames of the security footage replayed in her mind. Detective Marcus Hale tapped his pen against his notebook, frowning. We need to understand who this man is and why he came here. The methodical way he moved. It's not random. Someone planned this. The thought alone made Avellini shiver. She couldn't help but remember the elderly woman's words from earlier that week. The cryptic warning about snow, the urgency in her gaze. It had felt strange then, almost whimsical, but now it carried the weight of prophecy. Do you think it could be related to Edward? Avellini asked quietly. The detective didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning the footage again. We can't rule anyone out, he finally said. But I want you to stay calm and alert. Tonight isn't over. Avellini returned home reluctantly, Marcus following to make sure she was safe. The snowstorm had intensified, swirling in thick, blinding sheets that made the familiar street feel alien and menacing. Inside, Avellini double-checked the locks on every door and window, setting a small lamp in the living room to give a sense of warmth and life in the otherwise shadowed house. Yet the sense of being watched didn't leave her. She felt exposed, like a puzzle piece in a game she hadn't agreed to play. She had barely settled when the phone rang. Her heart leaped into her throat. Avellini Carter? Marcus' voice came over the line. You need to see this. We've tracked the license plate of the vehicle that appeared on your security footage. It belongs to a real estate appraisal company in town. But here's the strange part. They claim someone ordered a nighttime appraisal of your house. Avellini's fingers tightened around the phone. Someone ordered a nighttime appraisal? She whispered, disbelief and panic mingling. That doesn't make sense. Marcus' tone was sharp now. It gets stranger. The order was made under Edward's name, but the documentation is unusual. We need to verify its authenticity immediately. The next morning, Avellini and Marcus went straight to Hearthstone Realty. The office was modest but organized, and a young assistant led them to the director's office. Isaac Graves, a man with thin-framed glasses and a faintly nervous expression, greeted them. How can I help you? He asked. Marcus didn't waste time. We need to discuss an appraisal done last night at 42 Willow Creek Lane, he said firmly. Graves' face paled. That That was authorized by Mr. Carter. Everything was processed with a notarized power of attorney, he stammered. Avellini felt her chest tighten. She had never signed anything authorizing Edward to act in real estate matters, nor had she ever given him the authority to represent her in any way. That's impossible, she said. I never signed anything like that. He doesn't have my consent. Marcus raised his eyebrows, taking notes. We'll need copies of the documents and any communication regarding this appraisal. There's a possibility of forgery or fraud, and we'll treat it as such until proven otherwise. As they left the office, Avellini's mind swirled with disbelief and fear. Could Edward really have done this? Did he plan to sell her house behind her back? And the mysterious man in the snow, was he connected? The elderly woman's warning suddenly returned with full force, as if a layer of reality had peeled back to reveal dangers she hadn't considered. Returning home, Avellini noticed that even the snow in her yard seemed different somehow. The footprints she had seen the night before were now partially covered, as if the storm itself was trying to erase evidence. She wondered if following the old woman's advice had prevented something far worse. Her thoughts raced, each scenario darker than the last. By late afternoon, neighbors began to notice Avellini's distress. Mrs. Eldridge stopped by with a warm casserole, insisting that Avellini take care of herself. You've always been strong, she said gently. But even the strongest need support sometimes. Marcus had also promised to check in regularly, making Avellini feel slightly less isolated, but still wary of every shadow in her home. That evening, Avellini made a decision. She would not wait passively for events to unfold. If Edward had acted without her knowledge, if someone was surveying her house under the cover of snow, she needed to reclaim control. With Marcus' help, she would trace the documents, investigate the company, and understand the true motives behind the strange events surrounding her home. But for the first time in years, Avellini felt something more than fear, determination. As she prepared for bed, the snow outside continued to fall, each flake a reminder of the night's warning. The old woman's words echoed again. Don't touch the snow. Avellini shivered, not from cold, but from the realization that one small act of kindness had led her into a web of deception, secrets, and danger that would change her life forever. She closed her eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring answers, and perhaps more questions. For the first time, she understood that some warnings were not meant to frighten, but to prepare. Avellini woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the blinds, the snow outside still thick and untouched in most places. The previous night's fear had left her restless, yet she felt a strange resolve bubbling inside. She would not allow the events of the last 24 hours to control her life. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind through the eaves, now seemed charged with hidden significance. Detective Marcus Hale was already on his way. He had promised to meet her early to examine the documents from Hearthstone Realty more closely and track down any leads on the mysterious nighttime visitor. While waiting, Avellini busied herself by tidying the living room, a ritual that normally brought comfort, but today only amplified her alertness. Each shadow in the corner seemed sharper, each sound outside more deliberate. Marcus arrived, his coat dusted with snow. Morning, Avellini. I reviewed the paperwork Graves provided, he said, handing her a folder. Something doesn't add up. The notarized power of attorney looks authentic at first glance, but the signature analysis isn't complete. I've already contacted a handwriting expert to verify it. Avellini flipped through the papers with growing disbelief. Edward's name was everywhere, authorized to make decisions in her stead, yet she had never granted him permission. Her mind raced. Why would he do this? Was it desperation, greed, or something more sinister? Before they could process the documents further, a knock at the door startled them. A young woman, bundled against the snow, introduced herself as Celeste Monroe, a neighbor from 2 blocks away. Her expression was urgent. I saw the man in the dark coat the night before last. He didn't just circle your house, he watched from the alley behind my place. I thought he was a thief, but now I'm not sure. He had something, a badge I think, or maybe a corporate ID. He wasn't ordinary. Avellini's pulse quickened. Another layer to the mystery. A badge? Corporate ID, she repeated. Why would someone pretend to be professional and then lurk around my house? Celeste nodded. I didn't get close enough to see clearly, but I could see him jotting notes in a small notebook, like he was surveying every window and entrance. She hesitated. You should be careful. Whoever he is, he's organized. He knows what he's doing. Marcus scribbled in his notebook, eyes sharp. This aligns with what we saw on the security footage. Someone was clearly scouting. The appraisal documents might just be the tip of the iceberg. By mid-morning, Avellini and Marcus headed back to the neighborhood, determined to find more clues. The snow was heavy, each step sinking into the powder, yet Avellini felt invigorated. Fear had sharpened her senses. They passed familiar houses, many blanketed in pristine white, their silence echoing the tension in Avellini's mind. At the corner cafe, a barista recognized Marcus and handed him a tablet. "Detective Hale, I think this might help," she said, nodding toward a surveillance feed from a nearby street. On the screen, a black sedan, the same one from the night of the footprints, crept along side streets, stopping briefly near houses before moving on. In one frame, the man with the notebook was visible again, methodically observing, then retreating. Avellini's stomach knotted. He's been doing this for days, or weeks. But why target me now? Marcus's expression hardened. There's a pattern. He knows exactly when Edward leaves, which suggests insider knowledge. Either Edward is more involved than you think, or someone close to him is feeding information. Either way, we're dealing with a highly organized threat. Back at home, Avellini tried to focus on ordinary tasks, but the sense of being watched was relentless. Every rustle of the wind felt like footsteps, every shadow in the room a figure waiting. She remembered the elderly woman's warning about the snow. Perhaps it wasn't superstition. It had been a protective measure, a subtle way to prevent her from interacting with something dangerous. By evening, Avellini decided to take action. She needed to gather evidence, protect her home, and understand Edward's motives. Marcus arranged for a temporary surveillance system around her property, with motion sensors and cameras covering blind spots. Lights were positioned strategically, creating an illusion that the house was fully monitored and alive, even in the depths of the storm. Then came the phone call that made Avellini's heart stop. The voice on the line was unfamiliar, low and controlled. "Miss Carter, or should I say Avellini, you've been quite observant." There was a pause, deliberate. "I wouldn't make any sudden moves. Tonight will reveal everything." The line went dead. Avellini sank into the couch, shivering, not from cold but from a chilling mix of fear and anticipation. Who was this person? How did they know her name, her routines, even the warnings from a stranger? And most importantly, what was waiting for her tonight? Snow continued to fall heavily outside, cloaking the streets in silence. The house felt simultaneously safe and dangerous, every window a potential stage for the unknown. Avellini pulled the blanket closer, but sleep was impossible. Every instinct screamed that this was only the beginning. The real test was coming, and she had to be ready. In the quiet of the night, she pondered the question that now dominated her mind. How far would she go to protect her home, her secrets, and herself? She was determined to find out. The storm outside had reached a furious pitch, wind rattling the windows and snow piling high against the sides of the house. Inside, Avellini paced the living room, her mind a whirlwind of suspicion and strategy. Every shadow seemed to stretch, every creak and groan of the old house amplified in her heightened state of alert. Marcus had insisted she stay put, but Avellini knew she couldn't remain idle while her home, and perhaps her life, was being observed. At precisely 11:15 p.m., the faint hum of a vehicle approached from the street. Avellini's pulse quickened. She moved silently to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the blinds. The black sedan from the footage glided into view, its headlights off, motionless in the snowy street. And there he was, the tall man with the notebook, methodical in his steps, circling the house once again. Avellini swallowed her fear, gripping her phone in one hand and a small flashlight in the other. She considered calling Marcus, but a strange sense of urgency told her that she might have to confront this intruder herself. She remembered the elderly woman's words, the warning about the snow, and it all clicked in her mind. Perhaps she had narrowly avoided a dangerous encounter before, simply by listening to advice that had seemed cryptic. The man stopped near the front gate, crouched briefly as if inspecting the ground, then straightened and began walking deliberately toward the side entrance. Avellini's breath caught. Every instinct screamed danger, but she forced herself to remain calm. She remembered the motion sensors Marcus had installed, hoping they would alert him immediately if the intruder tried anything bold. Suddenly her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus: "I'm tracking him now. Do not engage directly. Wait for my signal." Relief and frustration mingled. She wanted to act to protect her home herself, but she knew Marcus was right. Patience could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Minutes felt like hours as she watched the man's every move. He paused at the side window, seemingly studying the interior of the house. Avellini's heart raced. She wondered if he had seen her at the window. Would he attack? Or was this part of a larger scheme? Some test, some calculated intimidation? Then, without warning, the man pulled something from his coat. A small device, flashing faintly. Avellini's stomach sank. He was not just a curious observer. He was gathering data, recording, cataloging, preparing for something more. She could feel the weight of his presence, as though the very walls of the house were aware of the intrusion. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus' message was urgent. "He's heading toward the back. I'm almost there. Keep calm and stay inside. Don't engage." Avellini crouched behind the couch, heart hammering, every muscle tense. She remembered every lesson of self-preservation, every instinct honed through years of life, and focused on breathing. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the backyard, the sound of snow sliding from the roof. Avellini froze. The intruder had moved faster than she expected. Panic threatened to take over, but she held herself steady. She remembered the elderly woman's warning. Some threats could be mitigated by caution, by listening, by acting with awareness. A shadow moved near the back gate, illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning. Avellini's mind raced. Could she confront him? Could she defend herself if he tried to enter? Or should she wait for Marcus, relying entirely on him to intervene? Every option felt perilous, every decision heavy with consequence. Then a voice, calm but firm, echoed through the night. "Avellini Carter, step away from the window." It was Marcus. Relief washed over her as he appeared at the gate, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The intruder froze, then bolted, sprinting toward the street and vanishing into the storm. Avellini collapsed into the snow-dusted couch, trembling from adrenaline and relief. Marcus quickly secured the back gate, then turned to her. "He won't be back tonight. We'll trace his movements, find out who he is and why he's targeting you." Avellini exhaled, the tension slowly draining. The immediate danger had passed, but the questions remained. Who was this man? What connection did he have to Edward, to the nighttime appraisal, to the shadowy dealings she was only beginning to understand? As the storm raged outside, Avellini realized that her life had irrevocably shifted. The cryptic warning at the grocery store, Edward's hidden actions, and the unknown intruder had drawn her into a web of mystery and danger. And now she understood that confronting fear required more than courage. It demanded vigilance, strategy, and the willingness to face truths she might not like. The night stretched on, silent except for the storm's howl. Avellini sat at the window, notebook in hand, recording every detail, every shadow, every sound. The battle for her home and her sense of security was only beginning. The morning after the confrontation, Avellini awoke to a quiet, snow-blanketed street. The storm had passed, leaving a deceptive calm over the neighborhood. She moved cautiously, checking the perimeter of her home, every step a reminder of last night's intrusion. Though the immediate threat had vanished, the shadow of the intruder lingered, heavy and insistent. Marcus arrived shortly after breakfast, carrying a laptop and a small case filled with evidence collection tools. His face was grave. "I pulled footage from several nearby cameras," he said, opening the laptop. "The man you saw wasn't working alone. There were others, vehicles circling the area, timing movements precisely. This is bigger than we thought. Whoever is targeting you knows the neighborhood well." Avellini leaned in, her eyes scanning the images. The black sedan appeared repeatedly, along with glimpses of other cars parked strategically at intersections. In one frame, a figure in a hooded coat paused at a corner, as though signaling the intruder. "How could Edward be involved in this?" she whispered. "I don't understand why he would do something like this, unless he's in deeper trouble than I thought." Marcus nodded slowly. That's exactly what we need to figure out. Either Edward is directly orchestrating this, or he's being manipulated by someone who knows how to exploit his desperation. Either scenario is dangerous. We need to find him, and fast. Avellini's mind raced back to the appraisal documents and the forged power of attorney. Suddenly the pieces began to click together. Edward's financial troubles, the night intruder, and the unauthorized appraisal all pointed to a coordinated plan, not random chance. "He's trying to sell our house without my consent," she muttered, feeling a wave of anger and betrayal. "But why? And why now?" Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get answers. But first we need to trace the appraiser and anyone who interacted with Edward. There's a network here, a chain of people facilitating this deception. If we can map it, we can catch them before they move further." Avellini spent the day combing through emails, phone records, and documents Marcus had gathered. Each detail added to the picture of Edward's desperation. Unpaid debts, unreported loans, and hidden accounts that suggested he had been hiding financial problems for months. Avellini felt a pang of sorrow mixed with frustration. She had trusted him, yet his actions had jeopardized everything she had worked to protect. By late afternoon, Marcus received a call from one of his contacts at Hearthstone Realty. "Detective Hale," the voice said, tense. "We found something unusual in the property files for 17 Chestnut Street. There's a second appraisal unreported, done last week by a different agent. The signature matches the forged power of attorney exactly." Avellini's stomach twisted. Another appraisal? Why would they go to all this trouble? Marcus glanced at her with determination. "To cover tracks, to make it appear legitimate. Whoever orchestrated this didn't just want your house sold. They wanted it to look like you agreed. That's fraud, pure and simple. And now we know it's systematic." The realization sparked a mix of fear and resolve within Avellini. She could not allow Edward, or whoever was manipulating him, to succeed. But confronting the situation directly was dangerous. They needed evidence, witnesses, and a plan. That evening, Avellini received a mysterious envelope slid under her front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed stark against the white. "Stop digging, Avellini. Some truths are better left buried. Your curiosity will cost you more than you imagine." Avellini's hands shook, but her resolve hardened. Whoever sent this message had underestimated her determination. He would not be intimidated. Marcus, seeing the note, said quietly, "This confirms it. They know you're paying attention. They're testing you, trying to see how far you'll go. But that only gives us an advantage. Now we know they're nervous." Night fell and Avellini sat by the window, notebook open, documenting every detail of the day. Each observation, each irregularity, each shadow outside became part of a map she was drawing, not just of the neighborhood but of the people conspiring against her. The snow outside glimmered in the streetlights, silent yet filled with secrets, just as the elderly woman's warning echoed in her mind. "Some paths are safer than others. Listen before you act." In that quiet, tense moment, Avellini realized she had crossed a threshold. She could no longer be a passive observer of her life. She had to take control, to anticipate moves, to strategize against an unknown enemy operating in plain sight. Her fear was still there, but it had transformed into clarity, into determination. As the clock struck midnight, a distant sound of crunching snow reached her ears. Avellini froze, listening intently. Was it the same intruder or someone new? The night held answers, and for the first time she felt ready to face whatever, or whoever, was waiting outside. The next morning, Avellini awoke to the muted light of a gray winter sky filtering through frost-lined windows. The house was still, but the memory of the note under her door kept her senses alert. She moved carefully through the rooms, checking locks and scanning the snow-laden yard. Something in the silence felt deliberate, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Marcus arrived mid-morning, carrying his laptop and a stack of printouts. His expression was grim, but there was an edge of excitement that told Avellini they had a lead. "I traced the second appraisal," he began, spreading documents across the kitchen table. "The agent who did it is named Tobias Keene. He's relatively new to the area, but his records show connections to a network of real estate brokers known for shady deals. This isn't just about your house. Someone's targeting multiple properties in the neighborhood, using forged documents and intimidation tactics. Avellini's eyes narrowed. Multiple properties? Then last night's intruder. He wasn't just watching me. He was gathering information on several homes. But why? What do they gain from this? Marcus leaned back, rubbing his temples. Power, money, leverage. And they're bold, enough to send threats and intrude physically. This is organized. And from what I can tell, Edward's involvement might be deeper than we realized. He could be entangled with them willingly or under pressure. Avellini sat down heavily, feeling the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. We need evidence, concrete proof. If Edward is involved, I need to understand his role, and I can't rely on him to tell the truth. Marcus nodded. We'll start by investigating Tobias Keene. I've contacted a source who can provide background. Criminal records, financial activity, associates. But there's a risk. Tobias could be dangerous if he suspects we're onto him. We need to proceed carefully. Avellini's resolve hardened. She realized she had to take a more active role. Waiting passively was no longer an option. She spent the afternoon documenting Edward's financial transactions, cross-referencing dates with the arrival of appraisers and intruders' movements. Every inconsistency added to a growing web of suspicion. Late afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. A young woman around 27 knocked politely at the door. She introduced herself as Claire Whitmore, a neighbor from 2 streets over. I saw the commotion last week, Claire said, glancing nervously at the snow-covered yard. And, well, I think you might need help. Something similar happened to my family a few months ago. We didn't report it because we didn't know who to trust. Avellini's heart skipped. Another potential victim or ally. Tell me everything, she urged. Claire stepped inside, her hands trembling slightly, and began recounting a series of break-ins and suspicious appraisals targeting her family's property. The similarities were uncanny. Black sedans, methodical footsteps in the snow, strangers posing as officials. As Claire spoke, Avellini realized the scope of the network was broader than she imagined. This wasn't just Edward or a single intruder. It was an organized operation, preying on unsuspecting homeowners, exploiting trust and fear. The danger she faced was only part of a much larger puzzle. That evening, Avellini and Marcus devised a plan. They would lure Tobias Keene into revealing his motives while documenting every interaction. Marcus set up cameras both inside the house and discreetly outside, to capture any visitors. Avellini practiced maintaining calm, controlling her fear and thinking strategically. Night fell, and with it came the quiet tension of anticipation. Avellini sat by the window, notebook ready, flashlight nearby and phone on standby. She reflected on the elderly woman's warning about snow, understanding it now as a metaphor, not just literal but symbolic of heeding caution and intuition. Listening, she realized, could be as powerful as acting. Around 11:30 p.m., headlights approached again. The familiar black sedan stopped at the curb, engine off. Avellini's pulse raced. The driver's door opened and a tall figure stepped out, Tobias Keene. He moved deliberately toward the house, but this time Avellini was ready. She recorded his every move, heart hammering with a mix of fear and determination. Suddenly, Tobias paused, glancing around, then stepped onto the snow-crusted porch. Avellini held her breath. Marcus whispered through the phone earpiece, "Don't engage directly. Wait for my cue. We need evidence, not confrontation." Avellini felt the weight of the moment. The intruder who had haunted her nights was now standing at her threshold, unaware that every movement was being observed, documented, and would ultimately reveal the truth. She knew that the choices she made tonight, patience, strategy, courage, would determine not just her safety, but the unraveling of a scheme that had ensnared her neighborhood in secrecy and fear. The first rays of dawn barely touched the snow-draped street when Avellini finally allowed herself a slow breath. The events of the previous night replayed vividly in her mind. Tobias Keene at her porch, every movement captured, every step a reminder of the danger she faced. She had resisted the urge to confront him directly, trusting Marcus's guidance, and it had paid off. The cameras had recorded clear footage, enough to expose his presence and establish a timeline. Marcus arrived early, coffee in hand, eyes alert and calculating. "We've got him," he said, setting the laptop on the kitchen counter. The footage is clear and I cross-referenced it with nearby street cameras. Tobias isn't acting alone. He communicates with at least 2 others, using encrypted messages. I also traced some of his recent financial transactions, and they're funneling money through offshore accounts. This goes deeper than simple real estate fraud. Avellini frowned, the sense of unease returning. So Edward isn't the only one involved. But is he aware of all this, or is he just another pawn? Marcus hesitated. It's hard to say. Some evidence suggests he's been coerced, threatened financially or otherwise. But we can't rule out complicity. We need to confront him carefully and see where he stands. The problem is, if he's hiding something, approaching him without leverage could be risky. Avellini's gaze hardened. She realized the urgency of the situation. Waiting could allow Tobias and his associates to move further, potentially putting her home and the neighborhood at risk. She needed a plan, a strategy that combined courage with foresight. They spent the morning analyzing the files, mapping connections between Tobias, Edward, and unknown accomplices. Every name, every transaction, every vehicle spotted in the snow became part of a growing web, a digital and physical trail that could lead them to the truth. The more Avellini studied, the more she realized how carefully the network operated. Each move calculated, each threat veiled under the guise of legitimacy. By afternoon, Avellini made a decision. She would confront Edward first, not with anger but with evidence. She needed clarity, answers, and a measure of accountability before pursuing Tobias further. Marcus accompanied her to a small cafe downtown, a neutral location where confrontation could be controlled. Edward arrived, tense, avoiding her gaze. "Avellini," he started, his voice low. "I can explain." "Explain what, Edward?" she interrupted, holding up a folder thick with documentation. "The forged power of attorney? The second appraisal? The black sedan outside my house last week? You don't get to start with excuses." Edward's shoulders slumped. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. There are people, dangerous people, pressuring me. I never wanted you hurt. I swear it." Avellini studied him carefully. The mixture of fear and guilt on his face told part of the truth, but she needed more. "Who are they? Names? Contacts? Everything you know. You have to be honest, Edward, or this network keeps winning and more people get hurt, including us." He swallowed hard, then began to speak, revealing a tangled web of intermediaries, shell companies, and financial threats. He admitted to forging the document under duress, manipulated by Tobias and an unknown partner named Larkin, who had deep connections in the real estate world. Every detail he provided fit with the evidence Marcus had compiled. Armed with this information, Avellini and Marcus returned home, urgency driving their actions. They needed to trace Larkin, uncover Tobias's associates, and stop any further intrusions. But the network's reach was formidable and time was now the enemy. That evening, as snow began to fall lightly again, Avellini received another envelope, identical to the previous one. This time the message was typed in red ink. "You are meddling where you shouldn't. One more step and the consequences will be irreversible." Avellini felt a surge of defiance. Whoever sent it underestimated her resolve. She looked at Marcus. "We've got their names, their connections, their methods. They think they can intimidate us, but we're ready. It's time we take control." Night fell and the neighborhood quieted under the fresh layer of snow. Avellini, notebook open, plans sketched and contingencies in place, felt an odd mix of fear and empowerment. She had crossed the line from passive observer to active strategist. Every move she made from now on would be deliberate, calculated, and unwavering. As the wind whispered against the window panes, she thought back to the mysterious warnings, the elderly woman's cryptic advice, the notes slipped under her door, the shadows moving through snow. They had all prepared her for this moment, teaching her that vigilance, courage, and patience were the tools of survival. And she was ready to use them. Snow blanketed the streets in a silent, almost oppressive calm as Avellini sat at her kitchen table, reviewing every detail she had gathered. The network's reach was clearer now. Tobias King, Larkin, and several unknown associates had been systematically targeting homes in the area, exploiting trust and fear to execute their schemes. The recent threats confirmed they were aware she had discovered too much. There was no turning back. Marcus leaned over the table, pointing at a map marked with addresses and timestamps. "These are the houses they've hit in the last 6 months," he said. "We can predict their next target based on patterns, travel routes, and appraisal schedules. If we act now, we can prevent another intrusion, and potentially catch them in the act." Avellini nodded. Her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about her house anymore. It was about protecting her neighbors and finally putting an end to the fear that had gripped the community. She called Claire Whitmore her new ally, explaining the plan and asking her to remain vigilant. Claire agreed, expressing a mix of anxiety and determination that mirrored Avellini's own. Late that afternoon, Avellini received a call from Edward. His voice was tight with worry. "They're planning something tonight," he warned. "Tobias and Larkin are meeting near the old warehouse by Chestnut Street. I don't know exactly what, but it's urgent. You need to be careful." Avellini's mind raced. She had to decide: confront them now, possibly risking exposure, or observe from a safe distance, gathering evidence for authorities. Strategy and instinct clashed within her. Ultimately, she knew patience was her greatest weapon. Acting impulsively could endanger not just herself but everyone involved. By 9 p.m. Avellini and Marcus were positioned in a discreet location overlooking the warehouse. Night had fallen fully, and the snow muffled the world in an eerie silence. A black sedan appeared on the road, its headlights slicing through the darkness. A tall figure stepped out, Tobias, followed by Larkin and 2 additional men Avellini didn't recognize. Avellini's pulse quickened. She signaled Marcus to start recording. Every movement, every whispered exchange would be captured. Tobias and Larkin discussed in hushed tones, unaware that they were being monitored. Their conversation revealed plans to intimidate additional homeowners and complete another fraudulent appraisal, proof that their operation extended beyond isolated incidents. Suddenly, a noise behind them made Avellini tense. Claire emerged from the shadows, bundled in winter gear, holding a small infrared camera. "I followed your instructions," she whispered. "We can get a closer look without being seen." Avellini nodded, grateful. Together they adjusted their vantage point, ensuring they captured the evidence needed to involve law enforcement decisively. Every step they took was precise, calculated, and silent. Minutes later, a van arrived, and the 2 additional men entered it with equipment and documents. The level of organization was staggering: maps, binders, and digital devices suggesting a carefully coordinated scheme. Tobias and Larkin seemed unaware that their network was being exposed in real time. Avellini's heart pounded. She realized the magnitude of what they were uncovering. The network wasn't just about real estate fraud, it was a coordinated operation, possibly with financial and criminal implications far beyond what they had imagined. She glanced at Marcus and Claire, their determination mirrored in her own reflection. Then unexpectedly, Tobias turned toward their hidden position. For a split second, Avellini felt panic, but Marcus had already anticipated it, adjusting the camera angle to capture the figure's face clearly. Tobias frowned, scanning the shadows, but quickly returned to his discussion, dismissing the potential threat. Avellini exhaled, silently congratulating herself on maintaining composure. They watched as the group completed their planning session, documenting everything meticulously. Once the meeting concluded, the team dispersed into vehicles, leaving the warehouse silent except for the wind whistling through the broken windows. As Avellini walked back home through the snow, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had the evidence, they had the proof that could dismantle the network. But she also knew the danger was far from over. Tobias and Larkin had seen glimpses of resistance now. They would retaliate, and Avellini needed to prepare for whatever came next. That night, she reflected on the elderly woman's warnings, the cryptic messages under her door, and the strange encounters that had guided her to this point. Each moment of uncertainty, fear, and intuition had sharpened her instincts and prepared her for the challenges ahead. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting decisively despite it. Avellini sat by the window, watching the snow swirl in the streetlights, her mind racing. Tomorrow she would take the next step, contact the authorities with the evidence, ensure the safety of the community, and confront Tobias and his associates legally. But for tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph, the first true victory in a long battle against shadows and deception. Avellini awoke to a gray morning, the snow from the previous night blanketing the streets like a silent witness to the events that had unfolded. Her phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, all curious, some fearful, all trusting her judgment. She knew today would be pivotal, the moment where careful planning, courage and patience would either pay off or leave the network one step ahead. She arrived at the police station with Marcus and Claire, carrying the meticulously organized evidence. Files, photographs and video recordings were stacked neatly, ready to tell the story of Tobias Keene Larkin and their associates. Officer Purnell, already aware of some details from prior reports, greeted them with cautious optimism. "If this holds up, we can put an end to them," he said, reviewing the folders. "We'll need statements, affidavits, and the recordings. You've done incredible work gathering everything." Avellini felt a wave of relief but remained vigilant. "This isn't over," she replied. "They've been clever, organized, and dangerous. We need to ensure every move is covered. No gaps." By midday, the operation was set. With law enforcement coordinating and neighbors kept safe and informed, the plan was simple yet precise. They would catch Tobias and Larkin during their next scheduled operation, ensuring incontrovertible evidence of their crimes while minimizing risk to anyone else. The hours passed slowly, the tension in Avellini's chest like an unyielding weight. Then late in the afternoon, the black sedan reappeared. Tobias exited, looking around cautiously, unaware that the authorities had monitored his every move and knew his next steps. Larkin followed in a second vehicle, carrying the same briefcases and folders that had become symbols of deception and control. Avellini and Claire observed from a safe distance as the law enforcement team moved into position. Hidden cameras, strategically placed patrol units, and marked officers ensured that the operation would be precise. Tobias and Larkin began their work, arranging documents and checking access points to properties. It was the perfect opportunity, the culmination of weeks of investigation, observation, and preparation. Suddenly, Tobias froze. His eyes darted toward a patrol car parked discreetly across the street. Panic flashed across his face as he realized the net had been set, the trap sprung. Larkin reached for his phone but was intercepted by officers who swiftly blocked his path. Within moments, both men were restrained, their vehicles secured, and the evidence they had tried to manipulate safely seized. Avellini exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus patted her shoulder. "You did it," he said. "This network is dismantled. Your home, your neighbors, they're safe now." But the victory was not just about the capture of Tobias and Larkin. It was about reclaiming power, asserting agency, and proving that careful observation, courage, and moral clarity could overcome even the most calculated threats. For Avellini, the experience had reshaped her understanding of resilience and self-reliance. Later that evening, back in her home, she allowed herself to finally relax. The snow outside reflected the warm glow of her lights, and for the first time in weeks, silence felt like a comfort rather than a threat. Marcus and Claire joined her for tea, and they shared stories of the long nights spent strategizing, the moments of doubt, and the quiet determination that had guided them. Avellini thought back to the elderly woman whose cryptic warnings had first set her on this path. It wasn't just luck or coincidence. It was guidance, intuition, and small acts of attention that had saved her from vulnerability and danger. She realized the significance of listening, observing, and trusting one's instincts, even when the advice seemed strange or inconvenient. In the following weeks, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Tobias and Larkin faced charges for fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy, and the evidence Avellini had provided ensured they could not manipulate or escape justice. Edward, cleared of intentional wrongdoing but forever changed by his involvement, worked to make amends, helping neighbors repair the disruption caused by the network. Avellini, now fully aware of her own strength, began exploring new opportunities. She returned to her hobbies, painting, gardening, and even learning French. She reconnected with friends, neighbors, and the community that had once seemed ordinary but now felt vital. Through adversity, she discovered the power of action, connection, and perseverance. As she sat by her window one evening, watching snowflakes drift lazily in the streetlight, she thought of all the lessons learned. Courage is cultivated, vigilance is essential, and kindness can illuminate even the darkest paths. She smiled, feeling gratitude for the journey and the people who had helped her navigate it. And in that quiet moment, Avellini knew one thing with certainty. She would never again underestimate the value of intuition, preparation, and the quiet strength that lies within.